and thank you for joining us on this webinar where we're going to discuss the role of the technology coordinator in terms of the Connecticut SAT School Day for 2024. My name is Michelle Rosado, and I work at the Connecticut State Department of Education. I'm the program manager for the Connecticut SAT School Day. And I want to thank all of you for attending and also for taking on the role of tech coordinator for your school and district. I'd like to introduce one of my colleagues was on, but she had to leave, Deirdre Ducharme, but I believe Abe Christ is on, and I was going to ask if he could just say hello and introduce himself.
Michelle, hi everyone. Thanks for joining today, as usual, at our webinar today about tech readiness for Connecticut SAT School Day. Thank you.
Thank you. And then I'm going to turn it over to Adrienne Cupper, and she can introduce the team from College Board, who are partners on the Connecticut SAT School Day. Thanks.
Awesome. Thank you, Michelle. I'm Adrienne Cupper. I get to lead our state contract implementation work at College Board, and I also work closely with the Connecticut State Department of Education on the Connecticut SAT School Day. I am joined today by James Wilson, who supports me in all of that work, and I'm also joined by Chase Thomas. Chase is one of our tech gurus that's with us today, and he's going to be answering questions. We're going to be doing questions in the chat, so when you have a question, feel free to pop it into the chat. Chase will be answering questions in the chat, and then any questions that still need to be answered at the end of the session, we'll do those questions kind of live, and he'll speak those answers at the end of the session. So those are the three of us here today. You may also know a colleague of ours who is not here today, but her name is Michelle Cosner. She is on our Connecticut field team, and so some of you or some of the folks in your districts may have interacted with Michelle. So she's another great resource, and she's kind of kicking around the state to be. Oh, Michelle is here. Excellent. Hi, Michelle. I'm glad you're with us today. She is a great support of the work that we do in Connecticut as well. So thanks to all of you for joining us today. We're going to cover. We have a couple. I would say maybe 15 or so slides to talk about a number of the technical aspects of administering the Connecticut SAT School Day in this new year with our transition to our new digital platforms. And then so we probably have 15 or 20 minutes of content of me talking, and then it's going to be turned over for Q&A and mostly Chase talking, because he's the super smart tech guy. I am not that person. So we'll just get started here. We've got a number of things we're going to talk about. We're going to go over just some of the basics of the spring Connecticut SAT School Day administration. We'll talk about the test administration system, some of our planning and policy items. We'll talk about tech requirements, using accommodations on digital testing, and we're going to talk about it briefly here. We will have a lot more on that topic kind of later in the year, but for right now, we just want to talk about some big picture stuff on that. Then we'll do any sort of we'll do Q&A. Like I said, feel free to put your questions in the chat right now, and Chase will be working in the chat to answer them, but we will also have time at the end to make sure we're covering everything. So first, let's just talk the basics of Connecticut SAT School Day. So in Connecticut, the Connecticut SAT School Day testing window opens on March 4th and runs through April 19th of the upcoming spring. Schools can choose to test students on any of the weekdays within that window, and you can choose to test all your kids on one day. You can spread them out over multiple days. It doesn't matter to us. As long as it's within that testing window, you're welcome to use the day or days that work best for your schools and your districts. The other thing to note is that we used to be very strict on saying that testing had to start in the morning, and typically kind of first thing when schools were into session. That has changed for this year. So schools are free to test students at any point in the day that works for them. So you can test in the morning, you can test in the afternoon, you can test kind of across the morning and the afternoon, whatever works for your schools. Just one thing to be well aware of, though, is that if you are going to start to test in the afternoon, you're just going to want to make sure that your schools have enough time to make sure the test is complete by the end of the school day, because students do have to complete the test in one sitting. And so you can't take half the test on one day and half the test on another day, or it has to be done in one sitting. And you also have to be clear that you can't take a lunch break in the middle of the testing. So it's really in one sitting, the reading and writing section followed by the math section all at once. The only exception for this would be students that may be approved for accommodations that break testing over 2 days. Some students may have limited testing time or other accommodations that may actually put them in 2 days of testing. So those students that have 2 days of testing, in their accommodations would obviously be able to test over 2 days, but everybody else should be planning to test in 1 day. Here's some of the timing. The big change. So our test is a multi-stage adaptive test now. It used to be kind of a very clear linear, like a paper pencil test just given on a computer. We now have a multi-stage adaptive test that actually is able to utilize the benefits of being a digital test. And so because of that, we were able to shorten the testing time. So our standard testing time for students without any extra time accommodations is 2 hours and 24 minutes, and that includes breaks. So it is a significantly shorter test than it used to be. And like I mentioned, schools are no longer limited to testing in mornings, so you can test in the morning or in the afternoon. And also, if a school wants to run multiple test sessions in a day, they are welcome to do that. So if a school wants to test half their students in the morning and test the other half of students in the afternoon, you're welcome to do that. That's absolutely fine by us. So let's talk a little bit about the test administration system. Our test administration system, there are 2 parts to it. There is Bluebook, and that is our student testing application. That is a downloadable testing application that gets downloaded onto student devices, and that's how students take the test. Students can also practice with Bluebook, and there are, and we'll be going into more detail for our test coordinators on how you practice with Bluebook, but students with their credentials used for testing can log into Bluebook and take full-length practice tests or get to experience the digital test preview, which is a significantly shortened version, but gives kids the opportunity to see kind of what questions are like and really become very familiar with the different tools in the testing platform. So Bluebook is the student application, and then Test Day Toolkit is the application for test coordinators and proctors and Test Day staff. Test Day Toolkit is a web-based application, so you don't need to download it onto any testing staff device. They can just access it from their internet browser. We provision test coordinators with access for Test Day Toolkit. That will happen in the spring, about 4 weeks before testing begins. And then they in turn provision access for their proctors. So the Test Day Toolkit system, like I said, though, is not, you don't have to download anything for Test Day Toolkit. That is just something people access by going to their internet browser, and they can access it. They can access it through their College Board dashboard, or they can just kind of type in and go directly to Test Day Toolkit. For the purpose of today's presentation, we're going to be focused mostly on talking about Bluebook, and that's what Chase is our expert in, by the way. He is our Bluebook expert. So that's going to be our focus. And that is mostly the technology questions that we get relate to Bluebook, because it is the app that you have to download and you have to make sure is ready for your students to use. So we'll be ready to answer any and all questions on Bluebook today. Now, like I said, Chase will be answering questions. If we have a question that we don't have an answer to, we will follow up with you. And sometimes it's because they're very specific to your situation, and we may need to follow up with you individually for that. Sometimes you may ask a question that we don't know the answer to, at which case we will need to follow up as well, and we want to make sure that we get you the right answer. So we may need to follow up. So some planning and policy stuff to know that test coordinators and school level staff will be aware of, but as technology staff, you should also be aware of. First, let's talk about the testing roles and responsibilities in those roles for College Board digital testing. We talk a lot about the school test coordinator, and the test coordinator is the person at the school level who oversees planning and testing activities for all students, including those with accommodations. The test coordinator at the school works closely with technology staff to ensure that devices that are being used for testing meet the technical requirements and that Blue Book is installed on student devices. The school test coordinator also manages all the staff that are involved in testing and makes sure that staff are prepared and making sure that students are prepared, and then that ultimately they're ready to actually give the test on test day. Then we have district or school technology coordinators. So we know that some schools may have their own technology coordinator type person on staff, and we are working with you, but we also know that some schools may actually utilize district resources for this particular role. So we're ready and willing and happy to work with people at a school or a district level in this capacity. And so the technology coordinator, though, works closely with the test coordinator and the SSD coordinator at the school to meet student needs for test day. And the SSD coordinator is the person who requests testing accommodations for students with disabilities. The tech coordinator also works to ensure that the devices that are going to be used for testing meet the tech specifications, and that person will make sure that Blue Book is installed on all student devices for testing. There are a couple other roles to be aware of. There's the role of technology monitor. This is a new role for College Board this year, and this person, technology monitor, could be the technology coordinator. That could actually be the same person, or the technology monitor could be somebody different. We know, especially if schools are using district personnel to fill the role of technology coordinator, the technology monitor is somebody that needs to be on site at a school on actual test day, and that would likely be difficult for a district level person to be in multiple schools at one time if they're testing at the same time. So the technology monitor, though, so it could be a school level person, and we see in a lot of cases, if it's not like the kind of technology coordinator at a school level, a lot of times it could be somebody like a librarian who does a lot of digital support for the school. It just needs to be somebody who can assist students and staff with basic device troubleshooting on test day. This person's going to be the person that's in charge of the help room. We recommend that schools plan to have a room that they designate the help room that students can be sent to if they're having technical challenges, and that way we can get the students' technical challenges straightened out without the rest of the kids in the room kind of being held up because of tech issues. And this way, it also makes it possible so that if a student has a tech issue where someone needs to call into and talk with our folks in tech support, that the student isn't in the testing room to disturb other students, but instead that student's in the help room getting the help that they need to be able to test. So that technology monitor role, like I said, it can be the same person as the technology coordinator, or it could be somebody different if that technology coordinator isn't able to be there on test day. There's the proctors, and the proctors are the people that are in charge of testing in the very specific testing rooms. So there's one proctor per testing room. They're the people who observe, they monitor all of the testing and what students are doing using the Test Day Toolkit application. They also observe the room, they help the students, they make sure that the room is free of distractions and that it's a secure testing environment. They'll complete a printed seating chart to make sure we know where kids are on test day in case there were any problems. And then they will also report any irregularities in Test Day Toolkit. So any testing issues that kind of are testing irregularities that impacted the ability for a student to be able to test. They'll report that in Test Day Toolkit. That gets sent to the test coordinator to see in Test Day Toolkit and then approve and submit to College Board. And then there are room and hall monitors, and these are people that help keep the environments, whether they are the testing rooms or the hallways outside, kind of safe and secure locations for testing to occur. The hall monitors are focused on the halls, as it would sound, as their name would indicate, and the room monitors are folks that support proctors in the testing room. But these folks, their main purpose is to make sure that students are quiet, that students are doing what they're supposed to be doing during the test administration, so that everybody can have a secure and standardized test administration experience. So a few policy things. First, we'll talk about start times and devices. The first thing, testing start times, as I mentioned, testing can begin at any time during the school day. You're no longer required to test at the beginning of the day like you used to be required with us before. So this is we've made a big change to make it a lot more flexible for schools to test their students when it works for them. Again, just a reminder that you have to make sure that testing is completed by the end of the school day before students leave, because they cannot pick up testing again the next day. All the testing, except for students with very specific accommodations, all the testing needs to be completed in one day for students. The other thing is that testing cannot be paused for standard test takers. So you can't have lunch in between sections of testing. So when you're planning when to test students, make sure you've planned enough time for students to take the reading and writing section and the math section, and then they can break for lunch. Also, you can also stagger start times at your school. So if you have particular concerns about, let's say, network congestion at your school, you may want to have staggered start times. So maybe you want one room of students to start at 9 a.m. and the next room of students to start at 9:15 a.m. And then so the next group at 9:30. You're allowed to do that. Previously, we needed people to really start basically at the same time. But if you want to stagger start times now, you're welcome to do so. When we're talking about devices, you can use a device. Devices can be used by more than one student for testing. So not at the same time, obviously, but we know that a lot of schools have one-to-one devices for students, but there are a lot of schools that don't. And so you may have in your school, you may have laptop carts, and kids may more than one kid may use that laptop throughout the day. So we understand that, and we have designed Bluebook to be able to support that. So Bluebook will need to be downloaded on and available on all devices that are going to be used for testing. But a student has their own specific login credentials, and those login credentials let them use Bluebook to access their test and complete their test. So you can have one student use the laptop from the laptop cart in the morning, they complete testing, and then after lunch, if you're going to do more testing, you can have another student use that laptop. They just use their own credentials to log in and take the test. You want to also ensure that devices can be charged, especially if they're being used by more than one student in a day, or if a student has testing accommodations, that means that their testing time is longer than the standard testing time. So you want to make sure that these devices have the ability to be charged. Obviously, we want them to be able to hold a charge, but that you also have power cords and everything necessary to make sure that you can keep those devices charged throughout the day. And then also, if your district does not allow apps to auto-update, you should have a plan to ensure that the Bluebook application is updated prior to testing. A few more policies about testing rooms and room assignments. So for testing rooms, each testing room needs to have a wall clock that is easily visible to students. There is a timer in each student's testing application. So students will see their timer on their screen themselves, but we do still require that there's also a clock in the testing room. The spacing and desk requirements stay basically the same for our testing moving forward, that you need to make sure that there's a minimum of 3 feet between each student. We do know that many schools will use computer labs, and so that is certainly allowable. And then large spaces like gyms and auditoriums with theater-style seating can be used. And we know that some of our schools want to, have all the testing occurring in one place. And so you are welcome to use a large school like a gym or an auditorium, or a large room like a gym or an auditorium to test all of your kids together if that's what you want to do. We just want to caution you should verify that you have the connectivity capacity in that space to support the number of students that will be testing in that space. For room assignments, the test coordinator assigns testing staff to the rooms using Test Day Toolkit. And like I said, each testing room will need to have one proctor. If you have a number of students testing in the testing room, so if you have a large room, and the manuals will share this information, but if you have a number of students testing, you may need additional staff, and those staff would be room monitors that would be in the room to help make sure the testing room stays secure and that students are moving forward as they should. Students are not required to be pre-assigned to a testing room and Test Day Toolkit, although you can assign students to testing room and Test Day Toolkits and in Test Day Toolkit. Test coordinators have the ability to do that. So if you'd like to organize that before test day and have your kids assigned to rooms, you're welcome to do it. But it's not required. So if you don't do it before test day, and you just want to kind of fill rooms one at a time as kids get to school that day, let's say, and they check in the central location and you send them to the room. They don't have to be pre-assigned to that room. If you'd like, they can just kind of go into that room, and when they use their room code, it will get them to the right place in Test Day Toolkit. If you are assigning, you do need to think about rooms in general, though, before testing. And when you are thinking about rooms and assigning students to rooms, you want to be just cognizant of the assessment they're taking, the testing time, and the accommodations that they have. So we do recommend, and Test Day Toolkit supports students being grouped by essentially, there are groupings based on testing time and accommodations, so that students who have, let's say, time and a half are going to test separately than students who have standard time. And that's something I think you're probably pretty familiar with from testing with us previously. And then students that are retesting should be assigned to a separate room. So retesting in our language is students who have taken the test first, one time already, and they had a testing irregularity. And that testing irregularity meant that they couldn't complete the test. And so those students have a retest opportunity, but the retest opportunity appears kind of as a separate testing event in Test Day Toolkit. So you're going to want to keep those students separate from students who are doing their initial testing opportunity. And when we work with test coordinators and we train test coordinators, we'll go into great detail about that. We have something that we call the digital readiness check that we encourage all of our schools to do. And so let's talk about what the digital readiness check is. It's an opportunity, it's something that students can benefit from, and it also has benefits for schools and test administrators. So from a student perspective, we don't want any student to show up on test day and find themselves using a testing application that they've never seen before. And so we really recommend that schools do a digital readiness check to give students the opportunity to become familiar with the Blue Book testing application prior to testing. We want them to be able to go in. We want them to see the different universal tools that are in there. We want them to know what the screens will look like so they feel comfortable and how the test questions are laid out. And so for students to be able to do their best on test day, it's really important for them to have the experience of understanding the testing application they're going to use. To do that, we have two different options within Blue Book. One is a digital test preview, and as I mentioned, that's a pretty truncated version of our test, and it's 8 or 10 questions in each of the test sections that gives the student the opportunity just to see and experience the testing application in a way that doesn't take a lot of time for schools. So students have the opportunity to kind of click through the questions. They can use our different accessibility tools. They can use the markup feature. They can use zoom in. They can see the testing timer and basically see how everything works on test day. The other option, and some schools want to do this, is they want students to actually take a full-length practice test. That is also available for students in the Blue Book application, and that students will use the credentials they get as part of the spring testing to be able to log into Blue Book and take a full-length practice test if they want. So this is another option. It takes a little bit longer. It takes about 2 hours or so to take the full-length practice test. But some schools may want students to have the opportunity to experience the full test prior to sitting down and taking the actual operational test on test day. So it's another way for students to be able to use the digital readiness check if they'd like. The other thing they get to do in the digital readiness check is students can confirm their registration information and testing application and testing accommodations. So when a student logs in and they'll do what's called device setup, what they see is they see their name, and they can make sure that their name is spelled right and appearing as it should for them. And they'll also, if they have testing accommodations, see the testing accommodations that are set up in their testing package for them. This digital readiness check gives these students an opportunity to make sure that stuff is correct. If it's not correct, a student can work with their test coordinator to get the information corrected. The test coordinator can work with their district or work with their SST coordinator to make the necessary changes to accommodations, or work with their district to make sure that a student's name is appearing correctly. But this is a great opportunity for students to be able to make sure everything is as it should be for testing. And then the other thing they can do is complete exam setup. And exam setup is where they get to go through and they get to see kind of the rules that they have to follow and their responsibilities when they're taking this test. So they get to review them and accept those testing rules prior to test day. This will save a little bit of time on test day. So in addition to giving the kids the opportunity to have a preview and get familiar with working with Blue Book, that it will also make the test day a little bit shorter, probably 15 or 20 minutes shorter on test day for folks. The other thing, and actually talking about that, the times that I put earlier, those times don't include the digital the exam setup portion of it. And so if you're gonna wait till test day, which we don't recommend, but if you're gonna wait till test day to do the exam setup, you kind of need to tack on about 15 minutes onto that testing time. The other thing that a digital readiness check allows is for schools to be able to do some checking, right? So specifically the test coordinator and the technology coordinator can use the digital readiness check to make sure that the Blue Book app is installed correctly and working correctly on student test-taking devices. So we do recommend that you have students use the devices for the digital readiness check that they're going to use on test day. And you want to make sure that there's no issues with Blue Book operating on those devices. The other thing that you can use the digital readiness check for is to gauge your network readiness. So you can kind of check and test the internet capabilities in a specific room. If you're concerned about test day and kind of your network readiness and capacity, your school wide, you can kind of simulate a test day experience and have all of your kids do the digital readiness check at the same time. So you can use it as an opportunity to kind of test things out. We'll provide a lot more information to test coordinators and tech coordinators coming up in the winter as we get closer to testing about the digital readiness check, and you'll have a guide to you'll have information to really guide you through how to do this. So let's talk about tech requirements a little bit. As the technology coordinators at your schools and your districts, you will need to make sure that devices that are going to be used meet device requirements. And so a couple things to be aware of: laptop, tablet, and school managed devices can be used. So laptops and tablets, school managed laptops and tablets or student owned laptops and tablets are supported. For Chromebooks, they have to be school managed. Obviously, desktops would need to be school managed because they're on site at the school. But Chromebooks specifically do need to be school managed devices. Blue Book is a kiosk app and has to be pushed out through the Chromebook console, and so Chromebooks have to be school managed. Personal Chromebooks can't be used. Additionally, devices should be plugged into a power source or be able to hold a charge for at least 3 hours. And then all the devices must be able to connect to the internet. And so you need to make sure that every device that's being used by either a student or a test coordinator has the ability to connect, a test coordinator or proctor has the ability to connect to the internet. Because especially so for test coordinators and proctors and those testing staff, they will need internet access on their device throughout testing. For students, students are required to have internet access at the beginning of the test and at the end of the test to be able to submit their responses. But we've designed the application so that if schools experience a drop in internet, connectivity throughout the course of the test, and we know that happens. Especially, we saw it as an issue last year when you were doing the CAI testing, the digital testing with us on the CAI platforms last year, that we know that schools had dips in their internet, and it could throw kids off and it kind of cause problems. Blue Book is designed to be able to let a kid continue testing even if their internet connectivity drops without causing a problem for that student. So it's just really important that students have access at the very beginning so that they can download their testing package onto their device at the beginning, and then at the very end so that they can submit their responses. But if they lose internet connectivity in the middle, they can keep testing. Let's talk about some device specifications. So for Windows laptops and tablets, they have to be running Windows 10 or 11 and have at least 250 megabytes of free space available. Mac laptops must be running Mac OS 11.4 or later and have at least 150 megabytes of free space available. iPads must be running iPad OS 14 through 16 or 17.1. Please do not use 17, but 14 through 16 and 17.1 are supported. And they have to have at least 150 megabytes of free space available. School managed Chromebooks, they need to be from 2017 or later, and they have to be running Chrome OS 102 through 114 or later, and have at least 150 megabytes of free space available. And again, you're going to hear me say it a lot, but we just want people to know they have to be school managed Chromebooks. The link on the screen that's available in the slides that Michelle has shared, she has shared the link for those slides. The link on the screen provides information about our device requirements and device specifications. So at any point, you can go to that and get all of this information I have just shared and more. Network requirements. So students and testing staff all must have the ability to connect to the internet, as I mentioned. I do want to call out, though, we know in Connecticut, most students and staff will take part in testing at the school they normally attend or school they normally work at. But if you do have situations where you have students or staff that are going to be participating in testing at a location they don't normally attend going to school, you will just need to make sure that anybody who's testing at your school has access to your internet. and that they have kind of, Wi-Fi access, that they have the password needed to get into the Wi-Fi so they can take their test. And in some cases, if you have kids that'll be coming from elsewhere, it's not common in Connecticut, but it can happen. You may need to think about guest networks or other ways to make sure that kids and educators from other locations, if your school supports that, have access to the internet on test day. You'll need to make sure that you install Bluebook on student devices. So as I mentioned, it's an application that needs to be downloaded and installed on student devices. You're going to want to make sure that every device that could be used on test day has Bluebook on it. So we know, and the schools will typically make sure that all the devices each kid is using have Bluebook on it, but we also recommend having a few of your spare devices with Bluebook on it as well, in case a student has a technical issue and needs to do a device swap. And we do support that. If a student has a tech issue and their device just kind of stops working, Bluebook is designed to allow students to switch out to another device if they need to. There's more information on technical readiness at the links on the screen, but just a note that if deployed properly, Bluebook does perform routine updates when students launch the application, but there are releases that occasionally will require a new deployment. Also, if Bluebook can't auto-update, a message displays that reinstallation is needed before a student can test. So just be aware of that. What we do recommend is that you sign up for emails about Bluebook and other tech news that we have at College Board. That link to be able to sign up for those emails is up there, and then you can get, via email, the latest information about updates and other technical information about Bluebook and our technology. So we also want to talk a little bit about using accommodations on digital tests. Like I said, we're not going to go into detail here, but a few things to just be aware of now, and then we will have a lot of detail once we get into the spring, so that SSE coordinators and test coordinators and tech coordinators can be really prepared for the specifics they may have to support for students. But overall, you're going to want to make sure that the school test coordinator and the school SSD coordinator are working closely with you as technology coordinators to be prepared to support students who test with testing accommodations. If a student is approved, the test coordinator and the SSD coordinator will have the list of students that have approved accommodations. And sometimes, especially if the student has an accommodation that requires the use of an assistive technology, they may need your support as technology coordinator to make sure that the device is ready to support that. So no later than about 2 to 4 weeks before testing. So after accommodation requests have been in, and most have been kind of approved, we recommend partnering with the school test coordinator and the SSD coordinator to be clear on all of the students who have accommodations that require assistive technology, and that all of those devices for those students are ready for that student to be able to test. The best way to do this, and what we really recommend, is not only kind of going through and making sure different accessibility features are configured and whatnot. We've got a lot of information on our website to help support the configurations you'll need to do. But we do recommend specifically to have students who test with accommodations that use assistive technology to give it a try well before test day and make sure that it's working and that it's what they need. And so you can use the Bluebook practice tests as a way to be able to support that and get kids to be able to try it out in advance and make sure it's all working as it should. So as I mentioned, the two links on the screen provide more information about our digital accommodations and using assistive technology with Bluebook. And so that has gotten me to the end of all the prepared content that I have. I want to make sure you have our contact information. The numbers on there are the College Board state support line. If you call into the state support line, this is the same line, whether the test coordinator is calling for policy help or the SSD coordinator is calling for accommodations help, or you as a tech coordinator is calling for tech support. So you call the one line and you can make the choice as to the kind of support that you need. You're also welcome to email us. Our email address specifically for the Connecticut support is ctsat@collegeboard.org. And you can see our website, specifically our digital information, available on the page on the screen there. Also, a very important site for all of you, of course, is CSDE's assessment page that has information about Connecticut SAT School Day as well. And Michelle Rosato's email address is there, and she is a great support for all of your schools. And she and I and James work very closely throughout the year to make sure you guys are supported. So, I think we're going to turn it over now to Q&A. How are we doing in the chat with questions and stuff?
I think Chase has kept up with most of the questions, although I just want a little to clarify a bit on the last response about the exam setup. I believe that in Connecticut, we don't answer the demographic related questions, but I
Correct.
just want to clarify that for everyone that's on here.
Correct.
So we don't answer any demographic questions that might have been answered during PSAT, or because of FERPA, we're not allowed to ask those questions of our students taking the Connecticut SAT School Day. So just want to make sure everyone knows that.
Okay, so a couple questions coming in. I'm going to read the questions that come in the chat out loud. Some of them will be for me to be able to answer. Some of them I'll need to toss over to Chase. So the first question is about test tickets. Will we be able to print test tickets in other configurations other than 4 on a page each? So let me just first say that we have heard the feedback from test coordinators that this has not been the best format in which to print test tickets. We are looking at what our options are to be able to make changes for spring. So we will continue to update kind of with Michelle's help, and in we'll have more test coordinator webinars and things coming up, but in those ways we will communicate out any changes we're able to make on that front. The question, will there still be 4 free score sends? Yes, there will still be the ability to for students to send scores, the 4 free score sends if they'd like. We will be covering exactly how they're going to do that when we get into our webinars and our training later into the spring, and we'll make sure you have screenshots so you're clear on exactly what students need to do if they want to utilize those free score sends.
Adrian, there was an earlier question that's somewhat related to test tickets and printing things, and that remains to be addressed. Specifically, can we add the option of printing the room rosters in Test Day Toolkit, as it would be a convenient feature after putting so much time into assigning students to a room?
So that's another thing that we have heard lots and lots of feedback on, the ability to print room rosters. So we are working on a solution for that. I don't have information that I can share right at this moment, but again, we will be working on a solution so that that will be an easier thing for you guys to be able to do in the spring, and we'll share the how to do that when we get a little further into the year. There is a question, can we have more than one coordinator who has access to Test Day Toolkit? Michelle, you ready for me to share the good news with people? Awesome, I'm going to do it. Yes, the answer is yes. You can have more than one person. For spring, you'll be able to have more than one person in the role of test coordinator in Test Day Toolkit for your school. And then we are also going to make it possible for the appropriate people at a district level to be able to see Test Day Toolkit for each of their schools. And Michelle and Deirdre and our friends at CSDE will also have access to Test Day Toolkit for your schools. So you might be saying, that's awesome. How do we do it? We're working on the how we're going to do it, and you're going to find out from us exactly how we're going to make that happen for you, because obviously we need a little bit of information from you guys as to who at a school level needs to have access. So we're going to be working with Michelle and Deirdre and our friends at CSDE to put together a process for that, but we will be able to make sure that you can have more than one person with test coordinator access at your school. So I'm very happy. That's the best news I get to share with you guys today. I know it's been a pain point for you guys throughout the fall, and we're excited to make that possible for you for spring. There's a question here. I think this is talking about kind of the digital the test, the digital readiness check, and the the kind of check-in process. Is it a separate section like it used to be called the pre-test registration? Yes, it is something separate. So you can do it well before test day. And we recommend you do it well before test day. If a student didn't get to do the digital check-in process beforehand, though, they are able to do it on test day if they need to. What do the question? What do the accommodations look like for multilingual students that are granted the accommodations? So, we still have the 3 supports for multilingual students. There's the translated test directions and the use of a word-to-word bilingual dictionary. Students do not need approval to use those. You will still be able to download those translated test directions as you've done previously and provide them to students, or if your students need a word-to-word bilingual dictionary, we still have an approved list of dictionaries for that use. For the third support, which is time and a half for multilingual students, the time and a half support still does need to be requested in SSD Online, as it has been previously requested in SSD Online. This is important because it's how we know to configure a student's test package with the time and a half timing. But once that request is in, the student's test package itself is configured with that timing. You don't have to set any timing for those students or anything like that. So when they have that in and it's in the approved status, they will be able to test with the time and a half. It's just going to be part of their test timing and how their test operates. Those students can test in the same room as students with timing that is time and a half for students that may have a disability that has it. But it will just continue to it'll just operate. It's embedded in the student's test package when they have that approved. I'm a tech coordinator. What do I do if the Chromebook locks up? This I'm tossing over to Chase because he's our tech guy and I don't know the answer to this.
Yes, we've actually answered that question in the chat, but I'll reiterate here. I asked for more clarity around lockup, and he was just asking around what happens after a student potentially signs out of the device while they're testing. And so once a student signs back in, they'll select the resume testing option from the Bluebook homepage, and they'll be able to resume the test.
Awesome, thank you, Chase. A question we have, will I have to reload all the staff for SAT, or does that carry over from the PSAT? So any staff that you entered for the fall will be in your staff library for the spring. You don't have to re-enter them. As we also get a little further into the spring, we're going to share some information about how we'll be able to support schools in adding in staff as well. So we have some stuff we're going to be able to provide some support to schools, especially large schools we know where it can be time consuming to have to add a lot of staff. So expect more from us on that front. But your staff from the fall carry through into the spring testing, and you'll be able to choose them in your staff library. Chase, you got that next one. You got that one. So a question on the translated test directions. The translated test directions not directly in Bluebook? They have to be printed separately. Yes, currently, at this point, the translated test directions are outside of Bluebook, and they are, and so you print them out separately and provide those to the students. We are looking, and we do have long-term plans of being able to have them included in Bluebook, but right now they're still outside of Bluebook. Let's see here. For PSAT, I had one EL student who needed extended time. College Board approved it on SSD, but Test Day Toolkit never gave it to him. It was never fixed with support. It was a known issue. Yeah, so this should be fixed for SAT. Trish, I would say that's one of those, maybe reach out to Michelle and I separately so we can look into the specific issue, but that should not be an issue for spring moving forward. If you experience that for spring, what you'll want to do, and you shouldn't, but if anybody experiences that kind of situation for spring, reach out to Michelle, and Michelle and I and James will work to make sure everything gets resolved. Okay, so this is, let's see.
Adrian, there's a policy question regarding testing outside of regular school day hours.
Okay. Oh, Rosetta, because you have this question every year because you guys have a unique school setup. Totally get that. Yeah, so I would say be in communication with our good friends at CSDE, but in terms of testing outside of a regular kind of, let's say a regular, 7:30 to 2:30 day or whatever that may be, that is supportable, and it's something that we couldn't support before, but we can support now. So I would say you just want to be in contact with Michelle and folks at CSDE on a policy side from CSDE side, but technically it can be supported now. I'm sorry, I'm trying to keep track of all these things to see what got answered, what didn't get answered.
Seating charts, are they in TDTK?
Seating charts are not in TDTK this year. They are things that you will do kind of on paper outside of TDTK. Long term, I think long term they should be moving into TDTK, but for this year, they will be printed documents that you do outside of TDTK. We've gotten there are a couple questions in here relating to how students are registered for the test. Michelle, do you want to just talk about that?
Yeah, we'll be using PSIS. So any students that are listed in grade 11 as attending your schools or programs, that's how they're going to be registered to take the test. And they will populate. See, I'm going to get it wrong. I wanted to say TDTK, but I think I'm wrong. Isn't it called something else?
They're going to populate in a system called SDMS, or State Data Management System. And
Okay.
so if you guys tested in the fall, you used a system called SSOR to register students and kind of see who was registered. You're not using SSOR for the spring. For the fall, you're going to use a new system called the State Data Management System. So you'll be able to see everything that came over from PSIS will go into SDMS. You'll also be able to do things like waive student accommodations in that system and a few other things that will kind of train you on down the line. But then what the information that then goes from SDMS into Test Day Toolkit and Blue Book for Kids.
All right, perfect. And we'll be doing nightly uploads for that because we know that you're going to be testing. We won't know when you're testing, so we have to be doing that every night to accommodate you to be ready to test students. So that's a change. That's similar to what is done for the other assessment programs, but we'll be doing it for our program this year. So, and we'll get more information out about everything. So
great. So Christine, your question about will SDMS be in your dashboard? I believe SDMS will be in your dashboard, like and how you access everything else. I believe you will see that in your dashboard. So Tracy, your question, during PSATs, we had 2 students who could not submit their scores regardless of what we did or tried to rectify the situation. It's College Board of Access to Scores. I'm not 100% sure what you mean by submitting their scores on Blue Book. Are you talking about their answers? Submit their answers through Blue Book? If that's the case, we have been working on making sure that there won't be issues with student answer submission, or there should be minimal issues with student answer submission in Blue Book. We are also, like I said, building out the ability to send scores, to do the score sends, and that will be available for the spring as well. So submitting their tests and answers, yes. So okay, so the tech teams are doing a lot of work on some of the specific situations that kind of came up throughout PSAT. By and large, just about every student was able to submit their answers and was able to move forward without issue. But we do know that there were some specific students that did have some submission issues. So our tech teams are working on that. And because we know the importance, like you said, of the students being able to take the SAT and make sure that everything is submitted appropriately for SAT. So it is something that our tech teams are looking closely at, some of those very specific things that popped up in some individual schools to address those. So I don't see any other questions in the chat, but I want to give you guys a couple more minutes to be able to get those in there if you're furiously typing away or have something that that popped up. So we'll give you a little bit more time.
and
Wow,
I was,
yeah.
oh, sorry.
I was just going to say, while we wait for those people furiously typing those questions away, we did have one question come in regarding common issues that we may see on Chromebooks, and so a couple important call outs around that that I wanted to make sure was said on this call. So one, we typically see issues with Chromebooks when they are not configured correctly, meaning set up correctly in the Google Admin Console. And I posted this link in the chat, but you want to make sure that you're following each of those directions on the installation steps and paying close attention to them, especially where the extension ID and the URL is concerned, and adding those into the kiosk application that you set up in Google Admin Console. Another important call out as well is the do not erase local data setting that will need to be turned on to protect student data. If those steps are not completed correctly, then student answers will be deleted. And so that's something we want to make sure we do when we're setting up the application.
Chase, are those instructions like written out in the tech specs so that the coordinators know that those are steps to take?
Yes, they are listed out one by one, and I'll post the link one more time just so it's not in a housing a response, but let me post it here. There we go.
And we'll make sure that that we link to those directions in just about everything we put out there. But the page that Chase has shared has a lot of very detailed directions to help set up. There's a question, so Chase, this one's for you. If we successfully tested PSATs with our Chromebooks, is there anything we need to do to be ready for SAT testing?
If you successfully tested it with PSAT, then it sounds like your Bluebook should be installed correctly. I would just encourage you to potentially launch the application ahead of SAT in the spring in case there's an update that needs to be installed. And again, if it's properly configured, the auto update functionality will kick in upon launch of the application to install that update.
Okay, a question. I am a little confused about starting Bluebook up on another Chromebook if the student device locks up. The instructions advise we have to make sure that Chrome OS 114 Plus is running so local saving can occur. If a student is on a version of Chrome OS that is below 114 and they have to hop onto another device, another Chromebook, will their test start from scratch? Sorry if this doesn't make sense. I think it makes sense.
Yes, I do think it makes sense. I think you're referring to the device swap feature. So the first thing I'll say is you'll want to make sure. So let's say you have 10 students testing, and you've prepared 5 extra devices for device swaps in the event that a technical issue occurs on test day. You'll want to make sure that those devices that you're using for device swap meet the same specifications that the students are using for the devices that they're using on test day. As far as swapping over is concerned, so while the student is on Wi-Fi on a network, Bluebook is consistently kind of pulling telemetry data to see where they are, like as they progress throughout the test. And so when a device swap is initiated, it'll pull the student's information and that the most recent, students' testing information that they have, and it'll start them from that point.
Thank you, sir. Here's an important question. What happens if a kid closes their Chromebook during testing?
If a student at any point kind of, let's say, closes their lid, shuts down their device, restarts their Chromebook, their device crashes, they will be able to resume their test by, signing back in either to that device, or if that device is no longer available for whatever reason, initiating a device swap and using a different device. Depending on what caused device to shut down, the student may or may not lose some time or have to. The student may or may not lose some time, but for most cases, they'll be resuming a test once they sign into Bluebook and clicking the resume test button on their homepage.
But we also want to make sure that students who have completed the test, so at the end of testing, that they don't close their Chromebook lids or their device lids until they see the congratulations screen that says, "Congratulations, your test has been submitted." Because we want to make sure that everything goes through without a problem at that point. So it's important that the kids know to leave their laptop, their lids up until they see the congratulations screen at the end.
And Adrian, that screen doesn't show up until time has completely run out, correct?
Correct. Students have to sit for the entire amount of time that they are allotted for the test. So that screen, it doesn't show up when a kid just stops answering questions. It shows up at the end of the time when the student answers are submitted, at the end of timing for that particular student. And that's when they'll see the congratulations screen when their answers have been kind of the final submission of that. So I think we've gotten all the questions in the chat. We have we are basically at the end of our time. So I want to say thank you so much for spending your hour with us. And thank you to Chase and James for supporting me in this process. And as always, thanks to Michelle and Deirdre and Abe at CSDE for being so awesome. And Michelle, anything you want to say closing it out? And Michelle Cosner too. Thank you for being here. But Michelle Rosado, anything you want to do to close it out?
Just thanks to College Board for the information, and thanks to everyone on the call for being willing to learn a new system for digital after you had 2 years of Cambium. We really do want to say thank you for that. And I guess that's about it. Have a great afternoon. And if you had any colleagues that missed this, I will be posting a copy of this recording, and the slides are also available on our website. So have a great day, everybody.
Thank you.
Thank you.